Hello. My name is Phil Torres, and I like to tweet. So I went into all this. I always wanted to be an entomologist when I was growing up, and some things happened along the way. So I still did entomology in my undergrad, but I kept getting distracted and wanted to reach more people and get more people to talk about bugs and see how amazing they are. So one of those ways is I started using social media. So what I'm going to go through is some of the basics of how to use social media as a scientist to communicate everything from the exciting to the mundane, because they all help kind of draw people into what you're actually studying. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about money. Now, I don't think any of us went into this career to make a lot of money, but we do need it to eat and to fund our research and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can use your online presence to get money. And one of the ways that I've discovered is you can kind of make up your own grants. You can kind of make up your own job just by having an online presence and then approaching the right people. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my approach to that. So first I'm going to tell you about what I do now. So I host a science innovation show on Al Jazeera America. We also air on Al Jazeera English around the world. And it is like the most fun thing ever. I have a, let me see if I can get this to work. Uh-oh, what'd I do? Let's track that.
Saturdays on Al Jazeera America.
A team of scientists are taking their inspiration from nature.
Technology is a vital part of who we are.
They had some dynamic fire behavior.
And what we do.
Transcranial direct stimulation. Don't try this at home.
Techno's team of experts show you how the miracles of science
This is my selfie. What can you tell me about my future?
can affect and surprise us.
Sharks like affection.
Techno, where technology meets humanity. Saturdays at 7:30 Eastern, only on Al Jazeera America.
I get excited every time I see that because I'm like, yeah, go science. So hopefully you guys got a little excited and we can carry that with us. So what I love about the show is all of us have a strong science background. We have 2 PhDs. We have me. We have another field biologist. And then we have a guy who was an engineer who has created satellites and bionic eyes. So all of us are able to approach scientists and have conversations with them in a little bit more educated level than you see with other news shows. So it's a lot of fun, and I ended up here instead of in giving lectures in the lab, and I'll kind of show you how I ended up here. So let me show you the beginning of what frustrated me about science. So my first experience as an entomologist in the field was amazing. The top left there, I did an expedition with Dr. Andrew Short, who's now at Kansas. We went through Venezuela for about 4 weeks. I think we found over 40 new species. I was like 19 at the time, and this was my job, and it was incredible. We found over 40 new species. A lot of them we were looking at lived in these hydropetric environments along the side of waterfalls. So we were in this beautiful country looking for beautiful waterfalls to find these beautiful little tiny beetles, and it was amazing. It was so incredible. 6 months later, I'm doing an expedition to Mongolia. And I'm meeting these entomologists like me, but they were nomads until they were 16, which was just blew my mind that you can get all these opportunities as a scientist. And there was freaking, I mean, look at those camels, guys. You can't beat that. We were in these old Soviet Jeeps crossing rivers and flash floods and all of this amazing, amazing stuff. But the emphasis as a scientist was this. You know, I got my name on a couple publications. And I was supposed to be happy about that. And believe me, I'm very happy. Publications need to be done with these, with any of these science. That's obvious. I'm not here to dog publications, but there's more to it. And I think we need to be called to do more than just get that result out there. So on the left is what we're supposed to do. And supposed to see, the public is supposed to see it, even though I think a couple of the top ones behind paywall. On the right is what I experienced. So, quicksand. I got lost in a forest full of quicksand in Mongolia. That was nuts. Held at gunpoint twice in Venezuela. Once was some drunk guys, and another time the military was like, what are you guys doing looking at bugs? And they had these big guns, and that was kind of crazy. I sang with Mongolians. They loved to sing over there, but they spoke Mongolian, I spoke English, and we just sang songs back and forth, and that's kind of how we related. These amazing stories. Drink fermented horse milk in Mongolia. It tastes weird. Waterfalls. We checked out all these waterfalls. And, obviously, science is not all getting held at gunpoint. There are other things that we do as scientists, but I think we need to embrace our weird a little bit more. So look, I spent hours dissecting beetle genitalia. I'm sure some of you guys have done similar things, and, why the heck would anybody on Earth want to spend hours doing that? That is something that the public, if you tell them, sometimes people talk about their college jobs, and I will, they'll be like something cool like a bartender or a bouncer. I'll be like, well, I dissected beetle D-words. And they're just like, why the heck would you do that? And then you can explain the science behind that. You can explain why it's important to do things like that and tell a story. So, also got to visit Smithsonian collections and just see the vast wealth of knowledge that they have there. So all of this stuff on the right can drive people to the left, okay? Whether it's an exciting story about, some drunk guys in Venezuela with guns, or whether it's just the mundane stuff that you have to do in the lab that has a greater purpose, because it's still useful. It's still something that is different, and we all do different stuff from most people. I think I've run into maybe 2 entomologists in my life on the street, and we were just like, what? Like, you do it too? And so to be able to bring up what we do to the outside world, they respond really well. I think you'd be surprised. And so basically I got frustrated with this and realized that I wanted an outlet to tell these stories. So here's social media for you scientists. There is this book I read called Crush It, and I really recommend you guys read it. It's super motivating to tell your story. And he talks about a few things. He talks about caring about what you do and caring about the people you interact with. Then he talks about that you can always find your own niche online. If you talk about what you do, there's an audience. And his example of somebody who does something weird was like a worm farmer. And I was like, I think I'm as weird as a worm farmer, so if that guy can do it, I think I can do it. And then also finding your medium. So, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, a blog, doing videos, using Instagram. Nobody uses Instagram for science. I really would love to see more people do that. It's all useful. So I'm going to talk a lot about Twitter and the things to do as a scientist. How can you use it? What types of things should you be talking about? Behind the scenes access. So I think that's a huge one because people want to be like you and they want to learn about what you are doing. That is the truth. That all of us when we were younger looked up at certain entomologists and said, I want to be like that person. So if you can give people a sneak peek to what you're doing, again, it may seem kind of boring, but it's still it gives somebody a visual, it gives somebody an idea of what it's like to actually be that kind of scientist. It gives you a voice, it gives you a place to kind of rant about something or have an opinion or link to an article, say what you think is important. It gives you media interaction. Cameron, you talked about how useful that is. And it's not just useful to get out a message, but also useful to kind of build up your presence. And you can get quotes from the media from just tweeting with journalists, that kind of thing. Other interaction. I'm always talking to other bug people out there. It's great. Cred. You can kind of have like street cred. If you have a lot of followers, or even if you don't have a ton, but the people who do follow you are maybe interesting, you can get some street cred, and that there is value to that. Impact and reach. So I think so much of us are motivated to share our stories because we want to impact people. We want to reach a big audience. And sometimes you do it intentionally. Other times it happens on accident. There was a time for me that I took a picture of a fuzzy caterpillar and I tweeted and I was like, hey, this is a cool looking caterpillar, guys, right? And before I knew it, within 2 weeks, it had about 3 million hits. Over the next 2 weeks after that, we got up to about 5 million. Because somebody on the internet compared it to Donald Trump's wig. And, when I took the picture, I was just like, I just want to share this little thing. But it just went viral, and I was able to kind of talk to some of the journalists writing about it and get quotes out there. So people heard the words urticating hairs. They saw that there are caterpillars that look like this. They now know that tussock moths exist. That kind of thing. So obviously, it's a minor victory. It's not like a huge discovery was talked about, but still, I think it's important because it is getting people who maybe haven't looked at a bug in the last week, haven't thought about like, oh, that insect is interesting in a month or a year or something. It's getting in front of people's eyes, and I think that is huge. So your impact and reach can be surprising. Inspiration and guidance, really good way to talk to students. They'll reach out to you. Collaboration, I collaborate on some of the research I'm still doing because of Twitter conversations. Information, sometimes you can't find that citation. I see it all the time. People are just like, hey, anybody know what this is? And IDs is a really helpful one too. Practice. This is really useful for practicing talking to the public because you get instant feedback. You see, okay, how many people favorited this tweet or retweeted your tweet or looked at your blog. You constantly can kind of work on your language that can then translate into public speaking, can translate into grant writing, all that kind of stuff. Funding. So this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about. Funding. It is, I had started grad school for a bit and then got pulled into this TV show I'm doing. And what I was amazed is it seemed like everybody was looking at this one chunk of money that exists. And every year it gets split up amongst everybody, and that's all there is. And if you don't get one of those chunks, then you're out of luck. But what I've seen is there is other little tiny chunks of money for science hanging around that I would love to see more people kind of create their own funding source, approach people in unique ways. So one of the basic things, your broader impact. When you're writing a grant, how can you show that you're impacting people? And there's another thing that Cameron talked about is measuring your stats, your impressions. So if you look, Twitter provides this for you. It's great. So I think I tweeted about weevils, and I had 500 people look at it. I had 25 people click it. But let's say I had 100 people click about weevils on that day. Imagine if I tweet about weevils every single day for a year. That adds up. You can actually say that this many people have looked at weevils because of me, because of what I wrote out there. If you're writing a grant about weevil research, that's a pretty valuable thing to have lying around. Crowdfunding. So if you look up facts on crowdfunding, it is hard to crowdsource funding if you don't have a crowd. And this is something that I'm seeing more and more people do, use crowdfunding for research. Sometimes you do see some projects that seem a little wonky that are getting funded, but all the more reason why people like you need to use it for good. And if you build up an audience, if you build up a reach, you can get people to care about what you're doing. So I'm going to tell you my secret formula that I did, and it worked really well for me, and I was actually able to accomplish a lot as a scientist, but I kind of made my own path. So I had a job managing a field station in Ecuador, and from there, and yes, there is something inherently pretty cool about the Amazon, but I think this applies to everybody no matter what field you're in. So I was blogging from the field, I was tweeting pictures about what I was doing, and I was discussing tropical ecology, conservation issues. I was making my brand. I was saying, this is who I am, these are the things that I care about, and I want to share that with people. There wasn't any reward for me at the time. There was nothing there. But I got recognized by an ecotourism company in Peru. And they said, hey, we like that you are doing this. You have this voice. You are one of the only people actually in the Amazon talking about the Amazon. And they said, how would you like to come down and spend a month with us? So I spent a month with them, and then I went beyond that, and I kind of created a job with them. And I'll get to that, but ecotourism is one of those areas. I think a lot of us would love to work in the tropics, and I mean, ecotourism isn't just in the tropics. They're all over the place. And I didn't realize how big this industry is, guys. It is huge. $77 billion every year, with a B, okay? That is a lot. If even 1 million of that went to scientists trying to do field work in some of these areas, that would be incredible. Now, yes, there are some companies that are better than others, so even if 20% of that money goes towards really good sustainable projects, I think some of that could be filtered to scientists. So let me show you what I got out of this. I got all my field work funded. I got all my travel funded. I did, I think, 8 trips in a year back and forth to Peru. I got a stipend, nothing crazy, but enough to pay the bills. I got logistical support, and I got access to some crazy bugs. I'll do a little show and tell right now, just some of the stuff that we were able to find. And what I'm proud of is that we found these things, but also we did it non-traditionally. And we kind of made up our own way of getting funding for this research that I think is important. So we got that on the top on the left, we discovered a spider that makes a fake spider in its web, so it's called a decoy spider. The little guy on top is the actual spider, and then it makes a fake thing. The only animal that can make a fake animal. Top right, we got a lot of attention when we wrote about butterflies feeding on turtle tears, because that's ridiculous, but it actually happens, and it's amazing. You could tell a story about sodium in the Amazon and all that. Bottom left, there's a YouTube video that we did on this eroded moth cocoon, and I think it has like 700,000 views. Bottom middle, that's silk hens, this mystery structure that we did an expedition last year. We got a lot of media coverage for that, which was great. Bottom right, I haven't written about this yet, but I just love these guys because they look like glowing gummy worms, and you can see the tracheals, and it's really cool. So that's what I got out of it. But the question is, what did it get the industry that I worked with? And again, this applies to ecotourism, but it applies to so many other industries. And I think when you look at things like crops and pest control, that's where they've been doing this for a long time. They find entomologists useful, but other industries can find entomologists useful too. And the way we did it is this. We had a unique voice. We were talking about something interesting. I had a history of using it broadly. So that was I had a blog, I was tweeting, I was showing all these things. There were real discoveries to be made there and real stories to be told. So we were able to draw attention to an area genuinely. That is very different than what most people do, which are advertisements. Usually people spend money on ads. They were spending money on research. They were spending money on, I went down, I could take other entomologists with me. We were doing actual research down there. We were making real discoveries. We were finding these interesting stories to be told, and that drew attention to the area. And that drew a lot of online interactions, which results in clicks to a website. Now, a lot of people out there, ads are super expensive. If you're trying to get 10,000 clicks to your website, you're spending thousands of dollars, a lot of money. It's much cheaper, is what I was able to convince people, to hire an entomologist, okay? If you want attention, let us find something interesting there. Let us genuinely bring attention to what's going on. So those clicks equal money for the industry. So basically, I served as their in-house naturalist down there in Peru. I was interacting with tourists that came through. I was kind of showing them, they were able to talk to a real scientist. They were able to publicly show their dedication to conservation. They were funding my research even into my PhD. And we were drawing tons of attention to the region in a genuine way. We were saying, hey, this is an amazing area. We should protect it. So basically, it's one of those things that if I could do it with my niche of studying butterflies and spiders in the Amazon, there are ways that you can kind of sell yourself to these alternate funding sources. I want you guys to be creative. So much of this I learned because I became friends with somebody in marketing who's an entrepreneur. And I'd never heard anything about business or being creative and getting money going through academia. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, you can really be creative and find ways to get these sources for your research and outreach as well. So, jobs. So for one thing, it's so important, build your audience. You can do it as a career, or you can just do it because it's a good thing to do. And there are ways, YouTube, amazing. I don't know if you guys have seen Emily Grosley, the Brain Scoop, Veritasium, Smarter Every Day. I just love all these people. And you can actually have a career doing this kind of stuff. I don't know how much any of those guys make, but I do know there are some people out there who get, a few 100,000 views on all their YouTube videos about various subjects. And they're making between 2,000 and 10,000 per video. Some of these people are putting out 4 videos a month. So that's a lot of money that you can actually have a career doing this stuff, or you can do it on the side and fund your research. These are real things that you can do as a scientist if you want your career to go that way and just communicate it, or if you just want extra funding, extra outreach for your project. So, yes, we are out of time. I was going to hit my basics of Twitter, but we'll maybe save that for the discussion. Okay, Twitter formula. So this is my personal way of tweeting. This is what I consider a healthy feed. it's got a good balance of stuff. It's like having a healthy diet of just, you want to balance what you're putting out there. This is my personal thing. I think it'd be great to hear other people who are active on Twitter, to hear what they use. And I'm using percentages that are very, very broad because that's the way I think they should be, because you can adjust it to just what you like doing even. So I consider 20 to 60% what you're doing and what you've seen as a scientist or whatever you are. So I gave some examples of some tweets that you could do. So, let's say I mounted up some specimens. I could take a picture of the specimens all mounted up, or even like before, just take a before and after. When you get them in the envelopes, take a picture of that. When you've mounted them all up and they look beautiful, take a picture of that. Post that out there. That is interesting. That is kind of that behind the scenes thing. And then just talking about, you can kind of promote your own stuff as a scientist. You could say, hey, I'm heading to ESA next week, and I'm going to present on this. Anybody else going? You could start conversations as a scientist. There's so much that you guys can do if you are in your lab, just taking pictures of the stuff that you're doing, writing about how many samples you went through in a day. That's stuff that creates conversation. It's stuff that people can be like, oh my gosh, I did that yesterday and it was crazy. And then other people out there who are looking in can see what it's like to be a scientist and to have these conversations across the country and across the world. So I really like it when people are sharing things that they find interesting. So sharing cool news, their opinion on articles, their interactions, what people are commenting at them, even some rants here and there. So I think it's really great when, if you find an article that you think is interesting, other people probably will too. So figuring out a way to link to that article, but make it kind of enticing. So sometimes you could just repeat the title of the article, link to it. Other times you could be like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen written about flies, or something like that, and link to it. And just kind of give your own personal flavor. I think that's where you can really kind of define who you are on Twitter, what types of things you're linking to, what types of things you're saying, hey, I think this is interesting, I think you should think it's interesting too, check it out. And that's where you can really develop yourself as, like I was saying before, the weevil person, or the spider person, or whatever it is that you do. These types of things, you can be this source of knowledge on that, where if people want to know, okay, what's going on in the world of spiders, I should follow this account, that type of thing. And then other things that you really care about. So I worked in Ecuador for a year. That's something that if I saw there's some report on deforestation rate, I would write about that and say how I feel, which would not be good. Then 10 to 20% of this stuff, okay? I just ate pizza, it was good. Or finally saw the last Lord of the Rings, and by saw, I mean napped for 3 hours. Because, I'm sorry guys, I just didn't like it. I'm sorry. So, it is important to be human, okay? We are not robo-scientists and all we do is science. Like, we are human, right? And I think it's great to have a little bit of that in there. Obviously, check yourself. Don't do anything too crazy of like what your activities are. But I think it's great to, you can relate. Like, I love pizza, okay? If I saw somebody tweeting about pizza who's an entomologist, I'd be like, hey, we have that in common too. I've been tweeting about, I had some donuts here, the Voodoo Donuts. Have you guys tried it? They're fantastic. But then, Cameron, I think you informed me there's another donut shop in town I should try. So it's good to have these kinds of healthy human conversations, and it's good to put it out there, just showing that you are more than just a scientist. There's more to being a scientist than just doing all science all day. You are sharing other things of being a human, like dog photos and stuff.